You think modern shipping is tough? You think a delayed Amazon package is a logistics nightmare? Try keeping thousands of men alive on a wooden tub, floating in a saltwater desert for years, without a single refrigerator, GPS satellite, or antibiotic. From bizarre onboard hospitals that were essentially death traps, to brutal disciplinary tactics that make modern prison look like a spa, and food preservation methods that border on the horrifying, today we are diving deep. We aren't just talking about not showering, we are talking about the true, untold survival stories of ancient naval fleets. Scurvy, mutiny, rats as a food source, and the celestial math that prevented them from falling off the edge of the map. Prepare to have your understanding of maritime history completely redefined. Let's set sail. When we think of naval warfare, we think of cannons, arrows, and boarding parties. But the grim reality? For every sailor that died in combat, 10 died from disease. The ship itself was a biological bomb waiting to go off. Let's talk about the big one, scurvy. They called it the Gray Death. It wasn't just a vitamin C deficiency, it was a horror movie. Sailors' gums would swell until they covered their teeth. Old bone fractures healed years ago would magically snap apart again as the collagen dissolved. And the cure? They didn't know it yet. They thought it was caused by bad air or laziness. Then there was dysentery, the bloody flux. In the tight confines of a ship, one sick man meant everyone was sick. And this brings us to the most uncomfortable question of antiquity. Where did the poop go? On a ship like a Roman trireme, you had rowers packed like sardines. They couldn't leave their posts. The solution was shockingly grim: gravity and buckets. The heads were located at the bow, so the ocean spray would, theoretically, wash the waste away. But if the wind blew the wrong way, the ship became a floating septic tank. If you got sick or injured, you visited the ship's surgeon. This wasn't a sterile room. It was often the darkest, bloodiest cabin on the ship. Amputations were done with a saw and a shot of rum. To stop the bleeding, cauterization. They pressed hot iron or boiling tar directly onto the stump. Survival wasn't guaranteed. It was a roll of the dice. Okay, you've survived the plague. Now, what's for dinner? Welcome to the culinary hell of hardtack. This was flour and water, baked until it was hard enough to stop a musket ball. It could last for years. The problem? Weevils. Sailors would tap the biscuit on the table to knock the bugs out. The veterans? They just ate the bugs. Extra protein, right? But man cannot live on bread alone. He needs meat. And without a freezer, that meant salt. Salted beef or pork was so dehydrated, it resembled wood. Sailors carved it into sculptures before boiling it for hours just to make it chewable. But the smartest fleets, the Polynesians, the Vikings, and later the Spanish, brought the farm with them. Live cargo. Ships were floating barnyards, chickens for eggs, goats for milk, and pigs for waste disposal. But imagine the smell. Combine the bilge water, the unwashed crew, and a pigsty in 100-degree heat. But the real killer was water. Water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. Fresh water in wooden casks goes green with algae in weeks. It turns into a slime that smells like rotten eggs. The solution? Alcohol. The Romans mixed vinegar or wine into the water to kill the bacteria and mask the taste. The British Navy later used grog. Sailors weren't just drunk to pass the time. They were drunk because the water alone might kill them. Before we move on to how they kept from losing their minds, if you're enjoying this deep dive into history, please take a second to hit the like button. It helps us get these stories out to more people. Now, back to the voyage. Disease kills the body, but the sea kills the mind. Cabin fever is real. Confined to a space the size of a modern apartment with 200 other men for 6 months creates a pressure cooker. To prevent mutiny, the ultimate disaster, captains use two tools: distraction and discipline. Distraction was simple: gambling, music, and storytelling. Discipline was brutal. Ever heard of keelhauling? This wasn't a pirate myth, it was a naval reality. They would tie a rope around a sailor, throw him off the bow, and drag him under the barnacle-encrusted hull of the ship to the other side. If you didn't drown, the razor-sharp shells on the hull would shred your back to ribbons. But how did they know where they were going? No GPS, no satellites. They navigated by the language of the stars. Polynesian wayfinders could read the swells of the ocean with their testicles. Yes, really, by sitting on the canoe floor to feel currents. Vikings used sunstones. European navigators used the astrolabe and the cross-staff to measure the angle of the sun and stars against the horizon. This required profound mathematical knowledge. A navigator wasn't just a sailor, he was a floating computer. Here is a terrifying thought. A wooden ship is a basket of holes held together by tar and hope. If a leak sprung in the middle of the Atlantic, you couldn't call AAA. One genius survival hack was fothering. If the hull was breached, they would take an old sail, fill it with rope, manure, and wool, and drag it under the ship. The suction of the leak would pull the sail into the hole, plugging it just enough to pump the water out. And this brings us to logistics. Ancient fleets like the Athenian Navy or the Chinese treasure fleets didn't just wander. They built supply chains. They planted gardens on islands to harvest on the return trip. They understood current cycles and trade winds perfectly. These were the foundations of the global supply chain we use today. When we look at a map of the world, we see the lines drawn by these sailors. They survived on rotten meat, drank green water, slept in squalor, and navigated by the stars. They were fueled by a mix of desperation, discipline, and an unbreakable human will to see what was over the horizon. They didn't just survive, they connected humanity. The fact that any of them made it back is a statistical miracle. So, the next time your flight is delayed or your Wi-Fi cuts out, remember the sailor eating a weevil-infested biscuit in a storm off the Cape of Good Hope. Which of these survival tactics shocked you the most? Would you rather eat the hardtack or face the surgeon? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next voyage. Thanks for watching and stay curious.